Okay, so my asset manager is a singleton that pretty much just has two maps, one for the models and one for the textures. In addition to this, the functions are loading a model, getting a model, and unloading the assets. There's load and get for the texture as well. So the way the model is done is pretty much just check to see if it already exists. If not, then override it. If it is, then override it. Basically, it converts the FBX file into an Azul at this moment right here, and then it actually gets that Azul file and puts it into the database with a corresponding name. Get model just gets, and then the same pretty much is for load textures, but you don't have to do the conversion, so it's pretty much straightforward. Unload assets can be called in the game just to free up all the assets, and it's also in the destructor just in case. Just to show that it does work, in the game CPP, I basically took out the conversions and I just used my asset manager for loading and then getting the model, and it should work. I inputted a new model, so it'll be like a square with extruded faces, and yeah, it works. So that's my own texture map too. Okay, so my input manager is basically a singleton, and this singleton has previous states. I'll talk about this two frames behind later. But basically, in order to get it to work, you have to constantly update the previous states of the keys. And in this case, I basically just have a map which is int, which I used as the key enums because they can turn into ints quite easily. So that was my reasoning behind that. And then a boolean, whether it was pressed in the previous state or not. And basically, I had to go into the engine and put it in the very first. I researched a little bit on game loops, and it seems that everyone, or at least most of them, have the input being first, so then it can actually update it in the game objects or whatever kind of game loop that they have. Okay, so there's a deregister and a register, and all that is basically putting it into this list, which is the inputable objects. I kind of went a little bit ahead, but it doesn't really matter because I have the cout messages too that we talked about in class, but I just wanted to see if they actually call all of the callback functions. My inputable class is just basically, just a function list. It's key press, key down, key up, and that is game object is derived from the inputable, just to test it. It could be lower or higher in the hierarchy, I don't know, but it's just to test it to see if it goes through. And it just prints out whatever key is pressed is being held down or is being released. And for the way I tested it was basically for key down, I have it traverse through the entire kind of keyboard and see the state, the conditional state of the previous one and the current one. So in this case, if the current one is false and the previous one is false and the current one is true, then that means it's a key down. If it's true before and then false currently, then that means it's a key up. And then if they're both true, that means it's being held down. And the way my manager works is I have it in the game loop update. So what it does is it checks for any key down, any key presses, any key ups. And if it does find it, then it basically just traverses through the game objects that are registered and sends that key to it. If there's no key, then nothing happens because it will just it'll just use the default inputable one, which is just nothing. Okay, so I also wanted to add another little functionality, and what that was is basically just having the ability to call and see if there's a key up, key down, or key being pressed inside of the game's update loop. Just to add functionality. It could be removed later on, I'm not sure too much about how it'll affect things, but I just wanted to have that, just like in the camera example where you use the key pressing, I think, event from the input man, and I'll show that the keys work. Right now this is just the regular, what we're supposed to do is pressing down, is it being pressed, and if it's up. So right now I'm just gonna press the A button. I have it spewing out the information. So basically, I press it down at the first frame, and then in the frames that I have it held down, it'll say is being pressed, and then it has been released. And the 65 is an A. I'm gonna do a B just to show that it does pick up the new key, and then 66. Um, and the other ones do work too. The ones where you call it within the game loop. Right now, I have it checked to see if a key is up, and then just on the left one, it'll kind of move the camera. Sorry, ignore this. It'll move the camera a little bit. Only on key up though. And as you can see, it does work. Going back to the console, you'll see where it did work. So, it only moves on key released. And that's pretty much the input manager. Back on the inputable. I wanted to keep that there. So basically all it does is I added another previous state, I guess. It's 2 frames behind state, and the reason it has to be 2